I get the pleasure of talking with Dr. Stan Tatkin, who is the developer of the Psychobiological Approach to Couples Therapy, also known as PACT, as well as the best-selling author of In Each Other's Care and his second edition of Wired for Love, which just came out on May 1st, not too long ago. Stan, thanks for being here.
Kyle, thanks for having me back again.
You're welcome. What I'd love to talk about today is one of the things you talk about in creating secure, functioning couples, particularly the couple bubble that you always talk about, is learning how to become an expert on your partner. And you talk about in Wired for Love and in all the other work that you do, how important that is.
Yeah.
Can you talk about why knowing how to please and soothe your partner is so important in a relationship? Because even in the book, Wired for Love, the second edition, you quote, I know partners who've been together for 30 years,
Yes.
don't know what soothes their partner and don't know what excites them. So why is this so important?
It would be funny if it wasn't so problematic. I think that let's put it in a different context. If a couple is a survival team, let's say on some level, that's true, that all unions have an interest in keeping the environment safe, right? You don't join an alliance to be killed within the alliance, right? So safe and secure. People tend to want to know, or a team, let's put it that way. People tend to want to know each other deeply to know how to work each other, strengths and weaknesses. What happens when a team member freaks out? What happens when this or that happens? The team or members in the team, generally speaking, have to be very good at picking that other member up and knowing how to shift them, right? So they get back in the game because everyone's needed. So the same thing in a partnership. It's in our best interest to know the animal we're with, right? That's another way of looking at it. And knowing how to approach that animal, how to soothe that animal, how to look friendly to that animal, how to lure that animal without using, a stick or a whip. That's competence, right? Skill.
Mhm.
And so the idea that we should study each other and pay attention and learn that person is lost on most people in couples because there's no idea that that should happen or that that's a feature, right? I think people want to be known, but they don't want to do the work themselves. That's reason number one. I need to know how to shift you because you're affecting me. There's no way you aren't affecting me. So if you're depressed, I need to know how to shift you into activity without causing a problem. If you're very, very upset, I have to know how to calm you down because you're affecting me. If you are feeling unsafe, I have to return you to safety in some way, or I can't influence you anymore. Either way, it becomes a problem for me, right? If we're to look at this as we are selfish, self-centered animals, it's in my best interest to be able to be competent at you because I need to be able to shift you because you affect me and I affect you. The other reason is that we don't like that which we can't manage. We
Mhm.
famously get frustrated with babies we can't soothe, dogs we can't handle, cars we don't know how to drive, or computers that are too fancy for us. We don't like them because we don't know how to work them. So the same goes for human beings. If we don't know how to work in the best way, I mean,
Mhm.
work our partners, then we will tend to not like them and feel that there's something wrong. Right? They're a problem, right? Not me. They're a problem. They should be, sent in for warranty or
Mhm.
go to the repair shop or to the dog trainer or whatever it is we think. So it's really vital for a good life and a good partnership in just so many ways to know how to handle our partner. And one more thing I hear often is, I'm afraid of her, right? Or I'm afraid of him. And I'm not talking about people who are violent. I'm talking about people who are assertive or maybe loud or animated or get angry.
Sure.
And I'll tell people you cannot afford to be afraid of your partner.
Mhm.
Your partner is your ally. The people to be afraid of are outside of your orbit, right? That's who you should be afraid of. But you shouldn't be afraid of home, which is your partner. That means you have to learn how to handle that person once and for all. Usually, this refers to, I never could handle that energy, that state.
Right.
Reminds me of my angry mother or my distant father, right? So again, we have to step up to the plate to be the team members that is required to be a really good union, right? If it's to work magic, and it can.
No, and I think that's what's so valuable is you really ask people to show up and not just go, oh, my partner has baggage or trauma from the past and that's their stuff. No, like in the book, you say if you're going to take a vow into a marriage or a relationship, part of that vow should be that I am now going to own or at least be mindful of how I tend to the baggage and childhood wounds that you have because
Yes.
they're now mine. I am now in some ways responsible for caring for that wound that is inevitably coming into our relationship.
That's right. I'm inheriting that. I'm taking it on. I now own that past that of yours because that past is going to affect me. Therefore, I need to know how to work with it and hopefully even help you heal the past. That would be novel. That'd be great.
Yep.
Instead of make it worse, which is what we're inclined to do. Sadly.
Which is also what happens, kind of, especially in those insecure functioning couples. They
Yeah.
really struggle to show up and do that work. One of the things that you also talk about in the book, people might think, oh, my partner has all this baggage. They have 30 or 40 things they might be dealing with, and how am I ever supposed to help that? How am I supposed to do that? One of the things you really target in Wired for Love is there's only two, three things
Yeah.
that
Tops.
tops that really make your partner feel bad, kind of these core wounds, these two, three things.
Yeah.
How do partners or couples start to identify these two, three things?
Well, one is just extrapolate or just take what is happening in the relationship that activates your partner greatly, and then just kind of imagine a trajectory going backward. Is that a core vulnerability? Is that an area, a gaping wound that probably will never completely heal over? Because the earlier the injury, the more likely it's going to be there throughout life. It'll get better as we become more complex. We have more of us available to metabolize these experiences and manage them, but we're still vulnerable to them. So you could do that every time I give my partner feedback, they feel attacked and criticized and judged. Okay, well, let's see. How far back does that go? Again, how much do I know my partner? Where did that come from? Who's the original suspect that made that injury? I want people to understand that we're all, or most of us, have been injured in some manner in terms of the self. We
Mhm.
call those narcissistic wounds, right? And when the self is in development, it's quite vulnerable to others in the relationship, others meaning the giants in our lives, right? The gods, the parents, the teachers, the big people.
Mhm.
And so they could inadvertently hurt us without intending to, or with a developing mind, I could interpret something stupid, or I'm ugly, or I'm not important, or if I were only taller, or I'm invisible, or I'm not good enough. So all of these things could be interpreted by the developing mind. It doesn't necessarily mean that the child was abused or that the parent was harsh or terrible, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the etiology. What matters is that this is a core vulnerability. I think of it as one's kryptonite or Achilles heel. When affected, one gets caught in the grips of this and is in a state of mind that they can't get out of. Therefore, the other partner is duty bound, I think, since they have the medicine. The partner in the grips doesn't, to get them out of that
Mhm.
as quickly as possible. Not a lot of words, but some action. That is sort of the antidote to that poison that the person is suffering from. And that's skill. Oftentimes, the person, the source, is the partner themselves, which makes it harder, right? It's always easier if my partner's upset about someone else than if
Oh
they're
yeah.
upset with me, right? But yet, that is their suffering, and I'm the only person who can do it. Also, you could imagine, look at your partner and imagine them as a 5, 6, or 7-year-old child. And if you can't, look at some of their pictures when they were little. Most people can. And then just imagine, what might have plagued that child? Might have made that child vulnerable? For me, it was feeling like an outsider, not belonging, feeling like I was a kind of a weird kid,
Yeah.
that I was in my head, my own world, in my own dream world, right? Because I was just so afraid of everything and everybody. That was me. So, that could strike me at any time with important people in my life, right? Including my partner. So these are not that hard if one just pays attention. First thing is to do is to get people to care about this, that they should have a personal investment in being good at locating these and knowing, oh, I know why you're upset right now. I probably did that thing. I'm sorry,
Right.
right? Or I'm sorry, those people, they're a-holes for embarrassing you like that. I know what that's like for you. It just makes sense that partners in crime in life would be able to give each other a leg up.
Yeah. Well, and I think what you're speaking to is your partner is going to have stuff that is outside of your control that's going to impact them,
Yeah,
right? You might even do things that is going to impact them. As their partner, you have to be that expert. You have to know what it's going to activate. And just as you said, when that vulnerability gets touched, what's the antidote? And examples that you talk about in the book, one partner experienced their whole life being talked about how attractive they are, but then remembers a teacher telling them how dumb they are at writing. And that the partner keeps telling them, oh, you're so attractive, but they don't get a reaction, right? The person's like,
yes,
yeah, okay, yeah. But if they just said, oh, you planned this trip and that was so smart, and I love all the details you share,
right.
just that is, as you say in the book, is going to get such a bigger reaction.
Yes. I had a couple, Kyle, some years ago, lovely people. She hit midlife and really wanted to be seen in a very different way. She had always been seen as pretty and sexy.
Mm-hmm.
And her husband, bless his heart, when asked, what do you love best about your partner, would keep repeating how beautiful she is and how sexy she is. And I watch her face grimace and head down in just deep, deep disappointment, because what she really wanted to hear was she's a good person. That's what she wanted to hear, because nobody ever said that to her. If you're going to be effective, because I don't know about you, but it's a bummer to give your partner something and they go, oh, thanks.
Yep.
It means nothing to them because you didn't hit the spot at all. Or they ask for bologna, you bring salami, and they go, what? And you go, what? What's wrong? Well,
Mm-hmm.
it's meat. So to not say what your partner has been needing to hear is deeply, deeply disappointing, and a lot like injuries at home where parents don't seem to know their children. And that missing the itch, but scratching everywhere but that itch
Mm-hmm.
is an aggravant. It makes someone feel persecuted. Like, hey, how could you miss this every time? You must purposely be doing that. That's Melanie Klein there in terms of persecution, right? The baby doesn't understand why you can't soothe the baby. And so you must be persecuting, keeping it in pain.
Right.
So it's really important, both for the giver's pleasure and for the receiver's feeling of being known and seen, that you just stop being lazy. Just find it,
Right.
you know, find the spot or the spots and just go there. Save your energy. Don't say things that mean nothing.
And I think that's going back to what you're talking about. When that partner grimaces, the other partner's probably thinking, oh, I did a compliment. I'm complimenting them. This is a positive thing. But they're not paying attention to their partner's body language. They're not eye to eye, as you like to talk about. They're not face to face. Can you talk about in that instance when that partner's, oh, I'm making a great compliment. This should land. And they do observe that reaction. How can they become a better expert on their partner when those moments occur?
You mean, had he noticed?
Had he noticed? Right.
Well, two things at least. One, he shouldn't do what most people will do. What's wrong with you? You see, they're never satisfied. I give and I give, and nothing's good enough. That would be a disaster.
Yep.
But the right thing to do is, oops, I obviously didn't get that right.
Mhm.
And that I am showing you that I will not give up. I'll keep looking for you until I find you. That's the key. right? Not that I'm perfect, but I should not ever give up, just like I can't give up on finding the baby in my baby, or to find the baby in my child, or to find locate my child today, right? John Gottman's mind maps, right?
Right.
Where's Waldo today? That is how we feel love. And that's why therapists many times are doing what parents should be doing, and that is paying very close attention. But partners should be doing that, right? Otherwise, we're back at home, neglected and invisible.
No, and I think that's, I mean, this is what's so important is pay attention to
Yeah,
what lands for your partner, what doesn't.
I pay
And
bloody attention.
right. And if it doesn't land, when you have that thought of, oh, blame, what's wrong with them? That I did it perfectly. Own, oh, oops, just as you said, oops, that didn't land in the way I was hoping for. How can I try again? How can I ask, make a compliment about intelligence, make a compliment about who they are in a different way to see what, as you talk about, lights them up.
And I have another suggestion. The person who's trying to find out where to scratch the itch or to hit the target should not ask their partner for the clue
Say it.
because,
Yeah.
yeah, because it's insulting. Pay bloody attention. Do your freaking job. It's not your partner's job to tell you where to find them. You're supposed to look for them, right? And do your work because that is what is felt as love, right? Not, hey, why don't you tell me what you want for your wedding anniversary? I should have been paying attention to things that you've been looking at, places you've been searching on the web, hopefully, safe places. I should be tracking that because, hey, that means something. And so, I say this as if I don't need to learn the same thing, but I have had to. This is human. We're just so lazy and such entitled creatures, particularly, in love relationships, but I think all around.
Yeah, and I think this is in your book, I think it's in the first edition, but even in the second edition, the Emote-Me game, right? Is
Yeah.
what's going to excite you? How can I take these guesses? And you even prescribe in that exercise not to ask your partner what makes them feel excited, but to continue to try and continue to think about your partner, think about how you know them, and continue to try until you get a reaction.
Yes. Yes. I understand it. Of course, I understand it. And yet there's a part of me that goes, oh, what, what is it with us?
Mhm.
Um, uh, I would want you to do that. Do I think I should have to do that? Oh,
Right. I want you to come find me. I want you to come know me. I want you to put in all that
uh,
effort. But if I have to put that effort, then something's wrong with you that I have to make all that extra effort. And that's where we got these very confusing messages that are
yeah.
why sometimes
Yeah.
relationships are so difficult.
Yeah, because human primates are a pain in the ass.
Hmm.
That's the reason. That's the reason. All of us, me included.
Yeah.
That is what's important to do to make your partner feel like you give a damn, or to make your kids feel like you give a damn. Otherwise, your relationships are going to fall by the wayside. And many times that's a hard pill to swallow when you're, up in your 60s and you've ruined a lot of them,
Hmm.
as many people do.
Yeah.
And then it's tragic, right? And it's really hard to repair that. So
Right. To make up for all the time of not searching, not seeking, not finding that antidote. That
there's
makes
another thing. I don't know if I had it in the book, playing the death card, and it's a little morbid, but I'm not the only person to bring this up. The Buddhist Stephen Levine wrote a book, If This Were Your Last Year. I'm mangling the title. Live this year as if it were your last,
Mhm.
basically. But how often do we look at our family, our partners, and I know this is morbid, with the reality that anybody could die tonight or tomorrow morning? That is an absolute reality. Happens all the time. Will we have said everything we've needed to say? Will we have enjoyed this person fully? Will I regret anything? Because that would be the worst. And I think the reason to keep it in mind, even though it sucks, is to keep us from taking things for granted.
Right.
And we're making use of each day, and to make sure that we just don't sleepwalk. And it's one of those painful things because I don't like thinking about Tracy, not being here. I don't know what I would do.
Uh,
Yeah.
But I think that's what's so powerful. Again, you're inviting people to think about the tragedy and make them so aware of what do I really want this person to know?
Yeah.
Right? My wife, my kids, right? I want my kids to know I delighted in them. I cherish them.
Yes.
Same with my wife. If I walk around and go, well, I'm so busy, I got all this other stuff, I don't have time for them. I gotta run to the grocery store, I gotta do this. I can't even give them a hug or give them a kiss.
And then in a
Doesn't matter.
flash, it's gone.
Then it's gone, right? And yet having this thought, having this kind of stay with you of, hey, I could lose this person at any moment, which there is a truth to it. And that is startling in our bodies.
Yeah.
And that can drive us to take some minor detours in these smaller moments to show that love and appreciation and also find our partner's antidote.
Yeah.
You share that again and again so they get a very different message from you than they
Yes.
got in their entire childhood or upbringing.
There was a time when, before COVID, when my stepdaughter would just keep, because having a home office and another office, but having a home office is really rough on kids and partners. They're not their kind of thing. Kids don't understand how you could be
There,
at home but not available.
right?
And so she would knock on the door, she would come to the door, she would talk, she would interrupt me, she would just sometimes just stand at the door. And the way I got over it was I thought, well, what if I discouraged her from doing this? It could be arranged that she doesn't care anymore. How would I feel? Would that break my heart? And that I was afraid of more than the disturbance. And so after thinking that, I was fine with it. But sometimes we have to think about what is worse. That was decidedly worse. It could be arranged where she couldn't care less.
Right. Didn't want to pursue you, didn't want to spend time with you, didn't want to connect with you.
Yeah.
And all those efforts, even though, yes, they might have been annoying because you felt, oh, I got to do this other thing, I attend these clients, got to do these other things. It was still a sign of her wanting to connect, her
Yes.
pursuing you,
Yes.
wanting to
Yeah.
spend time with you, which is a compliment in its own way.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress.
Oh, I love that. I think that kind of ties into, I want to come back to kind of you really dive into attachment theory, and I want to start to talk about islands, kind of that avoidant attachment, waves, anxious attachment. You distilling all the research, you talk about as humans, we're predictable. Islands
Yeah.
and waves are predictable. We
Yes.
have predictable vulnerabilities. We also have predictable antidotes. Could you share what some of those antidotes are for people that are islands? Can we kind of talk about those vulnerabilities that they have and why that is, and then a little bit of how, as a partner, you can offer some antidotes? You offer some in the book, but I'd love to share here.
Just for the record, both sides are anxious. In fact, the avoidant or the distancing side, some of the most anxious people in that group, they're just not as aware of it, but they are. And the only group that may not be or really isn't predictable are people who are unresolved in their losses and in their trauma. Unresolved trauma loss leads to a fair amount of disorganization, disorientation. Those people actually are not very predictable until they resolve their
Trauma.
and grieve their losses and so on. So that's for the record. Pretty much everybody else is.
Mhm.
Uh, okay, so to think outside of the box a little bit, if you think of your partner as an animal, horse or dog, maybe a fear-based animal like a horse, that's big and scary, but actually is more afraid of you than anything else. If you wanted to endear yourself to that animal, you wouldn't be, hopefully, angry at the animal for flinching on approach or getting skittish if you approached on the right instead of the left, or if you would do whatever you could to understand that animal and adjust your manner, your approach to fit the sensibility of that animal so that you are perceived as safe and friendly, right?
Mhm.
It's the same thing here. And have a set of concerns and fears, insecures that are known. On the distancing side, it's engulfment, it's smothering, it's co-opting, it's exploiting, it's robbing the person of autonomy and choice, agency. It is taking things away from that person. They feel it belongs to them and being used. I think that covers pretty much
Mhm.
the main concerns and exposed and humiliated. These are the concerns largely of that group. And so if one understands that, that should alter, at least in the general, how one should or would approach that person in all things, particularly things that would be stressful, right? Now, we would do that for an animal that we want to be perceived as friendly and we want to win them over. but we won't do that with our partner. Um, right? Because we interpret their behavior as threatening to
Right.
us. That's why. On the clinging side, we know that group, as a generality, is preoccupation with injustice, the past of being neglected, not being valued, not being loved, not being wanted, feeling rejected, withdrawn from, feeling punished. Um, all of these are ever present in dependency type relationships. And so, if you knew that, would that change how you act? Would that change how you approach and how you deal with the reaction that animal gives you, right? So, for instance, waves can be negativistic. And so they're, even though they're in the clinging group, they have a lot of distancing behaviors. Most of the distancing behaviors are there to test that person to see whether they will in fact go away. And of course, being human, people, when faced with negativism, will go away,
Mhm.
right? Why wouldn't you? If you understood that this animal is growling at you, not be, I mean, this is hard to know, right? You
Mhm.
have to really know this. Growling at you, not because they want you to beat it, but they want you to come closer
Right. Hmm.
because they're expecting you to react to the growling, right? Makes sense.
Hmm.
But if you go closer, it wags its tail. The same thing with waves. You move closer after the negativism and they smile, they laugh, right? It is unexpected. They are running a routine, a memory, like we all do, based on a narrative, right? It anticipates this for good reason, because why wouldn't you anticipate something when it's always happened? Forget the fact that I contributed to making it happen, but it doesn't matter. And so again, this is noblesse oblige. The person in the know has the responsibility. The parent has the responsibility for the child. The teacher has the responsibility for the student. One partner has the responsibility for the other partner who is afraid and is remembering something traumatic, like relational trauma. So attachment is basically relational trauma,
Right.
or as Bessel van der Kolk has called ambient trauma. It's in the air. It's in the constant interactions. It's not a single episode.
Right.
It is far more pernicious than that. It is marbled into the muscles as a way of interacting constantly. So it's a harder nut to crack. But that is what calms and soothes us.
Mhm.
So I take an island and I grab the island instead of being passive and waiting for them to come to me. I grab the island. If I want, give me a hug. Look in my eyes. Tell me you love me. Make me believe it. And then I push you away gently. I beat the timing that is ever present, called contact maintenance, that the island has embedded sort of in their nervous system. That is kind of like I hug and tap, tap, I'm done. Yeah. So I'm beating that timing, and that person then, instead of moving back, moves forward because they're anticipating being trapped. Not only being trapped, but feeling guilty and ashamed for wanting to break away
Right.
because the other person gets offended and
Per-
has to deal with their wrath. So this changes the whole game if it's done enough of the time, not all the time, but enough of the time. These different moves that are counter to what is expected in the body is what helps the person free themselves of this certainty that this, in fact, happens all the time. No, it happens sometimes, but
Right.
it's not going to happen all the time. And the partner shows that they understand.
Right. And I think that's where you talk about partners have such a power to help heal each other and the relational traumas, right? Insecure attachment is an adaptation to kind of these relational traumas where you and I talk about this in a past interview of they didn't get a fair deal.
No.
Right. And so they adapt to that. And just like the island, feeling smothered, feeling like I don't have my own space. And so, hey, come here, love, but I'm going to also give you the space, gives them an experience of getting that connection, but also having that freedom. Right.
Yes. And you just reminded me of something, if I might, taking us off road a bit. This is why I was also, before attachment, I was in love with this guy, Ivan Bozer-Menouinage, who
Mhm.
was one of the great family systems leaders, thinkers, who was also an analyst. And he was the only person I know of that introduced the idea of fairness and justice in family systems, and particularly in child rearing. This whole idea that so much of our behavior in adulthood is driven by our perception of injustice by society, but beginning with the giants, beginning with the gods, the originals, right? Our parents, who in this asymmetrical relationship called all the shots, right? Called all the shots. And while there are moments when we feel unfair that Johnny got a gift that he wanted and I didn't at Christmas, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the unfairness that comes from having to align with one parent against the other because my survival depends on it, or that I have to give up my independence in order to take care of a caregiver who is too immature and too unable to self-regulate, that I have to stay close to them in order to be safe, right? I can't survive without that caregiver. So in order to get what I want, I have to provide them with what they need. And that's a ripoff, right? And that makes for an angry person going forward. So either I had to give up my independence or I had to give up my secure base too soon and act like I was independent before I was ready. So either of those are ripoffs. That really made sense that the sins of our parents become later burdens for society. So, but that is true also of relationships. And this whole idea of fairness and justice in relationships led to secure functioning, which is basically a set of social contracts. It's
Right.
not about attachment. It is to allow for secure attachment to evolve
Mhm.
out of social contracts that two people in a symmetrical relationship create
Right.
to keep it fair, just, and mutually sensitive.
Mhm.
That opens the door for secure attachment to occur. Because I think left to our own, I think it's safe to say that most partners will make their history worse. In other words, their experience of trauma and injury worse inadvertently, not purposely, because we're all reacting to the defenses the other person puts up that actually appear as unfriendly and threatening to us. So this is why it's so important for us to override this, because the tendency actually is to hurt each other more, which is why these relationships aren't going to last or be happy at least. That's why I'm so fascinated with social justice theory as it applies to a particular relationship, not the society at large necessarily, although I'm a fan of that too.
As you're talking about this, you look at an island and a wave and the injustice and the way they defend that
Yes.
triggers the wave's own vulnerabilities, own injustice, which causes their defenses that then triggers the island. And they, just as you said, over time, it just gets worse and worse. And they
Yes.
experience the same pattern and problem that is familiar to their memory, familiar to the sense of lack of safety and security. And it just repeats. And they don't become the experts on each other to do
Yes.
things differently that soothe,
Yes.
that might feel counterintuitive,
Yeah.
soothe and create that new experience that gets partners to feel secure and better with each other.
And ironically, they are the perpetrators of unfairness and injustice in their relationships because they operate solely as one person's psychological systems of I, me, my, and you.
Right.
So it's built into their defensive system to insist on a one person system of me, even though they want we and us, or at least the wave does.
Mhm.
And that's the irony. They can't get out of this. It can't work because their attempt to square things is causing another injustice. And so there has to be some mediation there and understanding that it won't work. It'll never work.
Which then is where the work comes in that you talk about, not being lazy, doing things differently, observing your partner, and being able to try new things,
Yeah.
not take it personally, and try new things to be an expert on your partner and hopefully have them also learn to be an expert on you. So you
Yeah.
two can kind of be in the foxhole. You can be that couple bubble that can not just survive this life, but really thrive in that security together.
A real team of equals that are serving each other and are not trying to get payback or not trying to unlevel the field because they're owed anything, right? That's the entitlement issue that we come to the table with from our families of origin. We feel entitled in these relationships, and there's no place for it. A lot of this is really about growing up. Secure functioning is about growing up and accepting differences, accepting being able to tolerate pain, being able to work with another person who's different than you, and to be able to construct systems and structures that govern each other in such a way that we're both protected from behavior that would harm the other person.
Yeah, I think this is such a great place for us to end our time today because
Right.
you talk about all these principles in your book, Wired for Love, in the second edition. And anyone who found this interview very helpful and, oh, how do I become better experts on my partner? How can I teach them? How can we create this relationship where we both feel secure and can really work for each other? Stan's book, Wired for Love, is really going to help with that. Stan, is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
I wish I could think that there's another way that adult symmetrical relationships could last long, be happy, and be durable. I can't. And if anybody else has an idea, I'm always open to it, you know. But every time I play this out and think about any other way, it always comes out too unfair, too unjust, too insensitive, too much of the time, and it will not work. It's not about healthy, unhealthy, good or bad, right or wrong. It's what works and what can never work with human beings, period. That's it. It's not personal.
No, it's not. And I think this is, I mean, you came to all these conclusions and this model PACT and all the work you've done through so much research, so much of understanding neurobiology, attachment, and social justice, right? And you go ahead.
It's also driven by my personal need to know and my I'm
Mhm,
still a fear-based person.
mhm.
And so a lot of this is driven, by this is personal for me as well.
And you found it so helpful to do it in this way to feel more secure with Tracy and to create the life that the two of you have because of all the hard work you've invested by doing these principles that you apply to your marriage and your life too.
Absolutely worth it.
Perfect. We'll end here and thank you so much for being here.